We're live, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Kim. We'll call this meeting to order of the Senate Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources Committee on Monday, February 19th. Kim, would you please call the roll?
Senator French.
Here.
Senator Hicks.
Here.
Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator Kolb.
Present.
Senator Larson.
Here.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Here. All right, it looks like everyone's made it to this meeting. We might have a few people pop in and out as we have bills coming up in other committees. We will begin today with Senate File 66, Water Exchange Amendments. And for an explanation of the bill, we'll go to Senator Hicks.
Madam Chairman, this is a product of your Select Water Committee. As we were working Senate File 65 that dealt with temporary change of use, there was some discussion of also looking at water exchange amendments to provide additional clarifying language to that particular statute. One's a temporary change of use. Exchanges are a little more complicated. They can be for a duration a little bit longer. But at that time, the committee thought what we would want to do is just make sure that we had a conforming process from a temporary to then an exchange. So there is no substantive policy changes in this amendment. This is mostly just cleanup and clarification, and to also codify some of the existing practices as they are. But there's really no substantive changes to the content here. It's just mostly cleanup and clarification.
All right, committee, you heard an explanation. Are there any questions for Senator Hicks? Questions for Senator Hicks? Seeing none, we will go to our state agency and the good state engineer, and welcome back to the Senate Ag Committee. Would you like to provide some comments on this bill?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Brandon Gebhardt, Wyoming State Engineer. I don't have a lot of comments. The Senator Hicks is, I believe, correct. This does not change the.
All right. Could we have you scoot to the other microphone, please? Thank you. And now we're all wide awake. Go ahead.
My apologies. Should have.
Let's start again.
But Madam Chair, this is kind of in response to some of the work that's been going on over in the Colorado River Basin, and I believe that was kind of the emphasis behind Select Water taking it up and just providing some clarifying language. But I'm just here for questions and happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions for the State Engineer Committee? Questions? Seeing none, I guess we'll let you go there, and we'll take public testimony. Any public testimony on this bill? Any public comment? We have two coming up. Come on up and tell us who you are, and give us a brief and direct public comment on this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jody Levin. I'm here today on behalf of the Trona industry, and with me is Mr. Aaron Reichel from Genesis Alkali, and he'll be providing testimony.
Good morning, Chairwoman and committee members. I'm Aaron Reichel, Vice President of Engineering Technology and Development for Genesis Alkali. I participated in Select Water's interim review and sincerely appreciate the attention to this topic, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today supporting the language in Senate File 66. As a 27-year veteran of Trona, my support is primarily from the standpoint of industry, but as a 27-year resident of Green River, I'm also concerned about the backup water needs of my community, and I believe these amendments will also help municipalities such as Green River secure reliable backup water in the event of Colorado River curtailment without having to buy and dry historic ranches. The Wyoming Trona industry has revenue over $2 billion a year, but more importantly, has over 2,300 direct employees, a payroll close to $400 million a year, and we pay local, state, and federal taxes and royalties close to $100 million a year. I've spent a good part of my time over the last 5 years working on ways of securing reliable, and relatively certain backup water for weather-driven water shortages while avoiding, if possible, the buying and drying of historical ranches. The exchange statute seems to provide the only practical mechanism, but the exchange statute also needs some adjustment. My read is that the proposed amendments to 41-3-106 in Senate File 66 do not change the function of current law, but rather clarify statute to provide more confidence in its use. In my conversations with ranchers over the last 5 years regarding potential non-permanent exchanges of water, the most important issues have invariably been that they don't want to hurt their own water rights or injure their neighbors. Several lawyers have told me that the language already in Section E of 41-3-106 should be interpreted as protecting their water rights from abandonment or impairment because there is still beneficial use occurring on that right during the exchange. However, if you are the one contemplating participation in a non-permanent exchange, you would want more than a promise of should. Genesis Alkali believes the amendments to Section E found on page 3 of the bill help provide clarity. I have discussed an additional amendment to that section with Senator Hicks, which I believe he will offer that will provide further confidence as to intent and avoid unnecessary confusion. Part D of 41-3-106 says, "It is the policy of the state to encourage exchanges. The proposed clarifications seem to support this intent of the existing statute by providing confidence to participants that their water rights will not be impaired." I understand there has been some concern with injury with non-permanent changes of water use, including an exchange. After years of working to understand options to avoid buy and dry, we finally got to the point we could submit an exchange petition for a very small amount of water. Let me tell you, the state engineer's office does not rubber stamp these reviews. We have been over 1 year in review of that petition, which seemed relatively small and simple, but has been very clear the state engineer's office is contemplating what appears to be every possible scenario to ensure there will not be an injury to other appropriators. Essentially, all of the senior priority water in the Green River and Little Snake systems that is not subject to Colorado River curtailment is held by agriculture. Because it will be driven by weather, the details of a curtailment of a Colorado River curtailment are unknown. We do not know the frequency or even if the first Colorado River curtailment will be 5, 10, or 20 years down the road. The Trona industry needs to have agreements in place so we are ready to activate these non-permanent water exchanges when needed, ensuring we can keep our customers and product and our 2,300 men and women employed. My concern is that if we don't encourage use of these non-permanent water exchanges within the state of Wyoming, the viable alternative is permanent transfers of water rights. This option is not good for ag, not good for industry, and not good for Wyoming. And that is why Genesis Alkali has been working to find alternative solutions and why we support Senate File 66. Thank you, Chairwoman Steinmetz. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions? Any questions? Seeing none, you got off easy. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Further public comment? Welcome, Mr. Magagna. You might not want to use the middle microphone.
I wasn't sure which one it was. Certainly don't want to hear that blast again.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. We believe that this bill provides some added level of protection to landowners, irrigators in particular, who may choose to enter an exchange of use agreement. I mean, the law already allows it, so we're not broadening that so much as we are providing some protections with the specific language that's in there. One of the concerns we always have with these is they're being done without adequate notice to others who may be impacted or may just feel that they could be impacted. And so I had submitted to the committee last week in anticipation of you taking up this bill, an amendment to the bill to provide for that notice. I've since seen an amendment that's been drafted by the state engineer, and while either one is acceptable to us, I believe his perhaps can operate a little more efficiently than the one that we had proposed to you. So with with the adoption of the state engineer's amendment, Wyoming Stock Growers would be in support of this legislation.
All right, thank you very much. Questions for Mr. Magagna? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there any further public comment? Welcome.
There we go. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Wendy Curran. Together with my brother, we own the Perriam Ranch on the Encampment River, just outside of Riverside, Wyoming. We have been working with the state engineer's office and the parties on an exchange that involves the Encampment River, exchanging water from a ranch it purchased, which is upstream and up ditch from our property, and exchanging it for use by the Sinclair refinery in, again, those weather-related years that may be necessary. I know that the exchange process legislation has been thoroughly reviewed and looked over. I believe there are some questions that remain about how that works. But as Mr. Magagna said, our problem was learning about this secondhand at what might have been the last hour, and not being able to have adequate time to determine if it would harm our use of our water, how we were going to resolve the ditches. We've worked with both HF Sinclair and the state engineer's office. They have been very helpful in addressing our concerns. But I think as the exchange petition goes forward and becomes a vehicle more frequently used for the purposes that have been stated, that we do really need to make sure that the process is noticed by the neighboring appropriators and by the public, that there is an opportunity for testimony, and that the process that's followed in the state engineer's office for approving both change amendments and the state exchange or the exchange petition is uniform. I too offered, and I'm sorry, some amendments last week to the bill, simply pointing out the need for more notice. I've actually discussed with the state engineer the possibility of requiring a public hearing for exchanges. However, I think those need to be limited to those that will have most significant impact on ag users. And that would involve such as the HF Sinclair exchange, anything that exchanges the use of agricultural water to be used in a different setting, industrial. And I think that those are questions simply that in our part of the country, in the Encampment River Valley, those kinds of things would have been very beneficial in understanding how this happened and what the consequences would be, and having the reassurance that we would not be harmed. So I just referred to some language and in our consideration, the process involves, as you know, the consideration of the exchange petition, by the state engineer's office. Often that requires some cleanup and change amendments for the water rights that exist on the ground. In this case, there were a number of change petitions for amendments to existing water rights that lined up with what was included in the exchange. I don't believe the state engineer would do this in subsequent actions. Our concern was that the exchange petition could have been approved prior to the Board of Control working those change amendments petitions. And in that case, you're sort of limited in what you can testify to or disagree with or converse petition on the water rights amendment side of things if the exchange has already been approved, if the exchange petition has already been approved. So my final amendment was simply to say that before the state engineer approves an exchange petition, that the groundwork for that, the cleanup of the water rights, the changes that need to be made have been considered and acted upon by the Board of Control, because right now they are two separate processes. And I think it's very important that the two line up, that the work gets done before the exchange is approved. And that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
All right, it looks like you might have do you have a question, Senator Hicks?
Yeah,
Go
Wendy,
ahead.
just a real quick question. In your testimony, you talked about an agriculture to an industrial exchange as being a concern. Sometimes these exchanges have been done for potential municipal to agriculture, but would you have the same concern if it was an agricultural to an agricultural exchange?
Madam Chairman, Senator Hicks, in my understanding, we have been using the ag-to-ag exchange process for quite some time. And I think in those cases, clearly the appropriators understand that that is a possibility of what is convenient, what follows the water usage, and generally does not create a problem. That was my concern in suggesting a hearing, is that I don't want the state engineer's office to have an expensive and time-consuming hearing on those that keep the water in its agricultural use. My amendment says ag to industrial. I would include municipal in that, simply because I think it's in the best interest of the people of the state to know what decisions are being made about its water.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Doesn't look like we have any more questions. Is there any more public testimony? Public testimony?
My name is Josh Chamente, and I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for HF Sinclair. Specific to Wyoming, we have two petroleum refineries, one in Casper, Wyoming, and one in Sinclair, Wyoming, with a combined throughput of 124,000 barrels per day of refining capacity. In short, we make gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel that make modern life possible here in the Rocky Mountains. As written, we have no issues with Senate File 66. Again, agree with the comments that were made today. It is worth noting that we are going to be subject to a public hearing. It is my understanding from the state engineer's office. So again, no issues with a public hearing. But water is critical, like other industrial users that previously discussed. Water is paramount to our operations, and having long-term visibility into water is something that we need to ensure that our plants are running for not just the next 5 years, but 10, 15, 20. With that, I conclude my comments.
All right, are there any questions? Questions from the committee? Seeing none, you've got off. Senator Ide, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Have you guys done exchanges quite a bit in the past? That's a question.
Madam Chair, Senator Wright, thank you for that question. It is my understanding this would be the first exchange that we've done. I know we've done some of these temporary water use agreements prior to, but we really do, we're facing so many headwinds when it comes to federal policy. We really do need to make sure that we have long-term visibility into water. And so this was kind of the impetus behind the exchange petition.
All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you. One from Senator Hicks.
So, Mr. Chairman, Josh, as I understood your testimony, you wouldn't have any opposition to providing a notice and, upfront that the exchange it's normally a process that's been in place a long time. And so you understand the concerns that people just like to know, how it could potentially impact them. I think that testimony from the Toronto industry indicated it's a very difficult and arduous process to go through the injury analysis. But you wouldn't have any concerns with the 30-day notice in the local papers that an exchange was going to happen?
Madam Chair, Senator Hicks, thank you for that question. As written, no. We'll note that the state engineer's office can call a public meeting, but I think this, if it creates some rules of the road and expectations from the industry side, I think that's probably a good thing.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? We'll let you go this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam
Appreciate
Chair.
it. Further public comment? Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Pete Obermiller, Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Madam Chairman, I just wanted to associate myself with the comments of our friends in the Trona industry and Mr. Reichel. The bill as is and the amendments that I've known about, the ones offered by Trona and the one from the SEO on notification are good with my members. I have not seen Ms. Curran's amendment, so I cannot speak to that without a little bit of time to reflect. However, I think it's important that the committee know that it's this, of course, is an issue statewide for industrial users. Temporary water use agreements happen in the oil and gas world in other places. There's been several that have happened here in Laramie County and some in the Powder River Basin, et cetera. And so, as Mr. Jimenez said, stated that visibility into access for water for operations is very important, and the ability to execute long-term agreements through these various processes is very important. So we're in support of the bill as written, and the two amendments I'm aware of also keep us in the support column. I'm not certain on Ms. Curran's amendment because I have not seen it.
All right, any questions for Mr. Obermiller? Seeing none, we'll let you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
All right, any further public comment? Is there anything online, Kim?
No, Madam Chairman.
Okay, no one online, so public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure on the bill? Moved by Hicks. Seconded by French. Are there any amendments on the bill?
Madam Chairman,
Senator Hicks?
you have in your package a proposed amendment.
There's two, so which one are you referring to?
Page 3, line 16.
Okay, this is the one, okay, provided by you. Page 3, line 16.
Yeah, Madam Chairman. And again, this has gone through, I think, a pretty rigorous review between our LSO attorneys, I believe, State Engineer's Office, and more than anything else, this just provides that guarantee and those reassurances to those water right holders that enter into an agreement that by doing so in no way jeopardizes at the termination of the exchange that the rights of all appropriators under their original appropriation shall automatically be reinvested with all the rights, privileges, and uses and purposes therefore to be held and enjoyed. Basically, this says if you enter into one of these agreements for whatever duration, at the termination of that agreement, every provision under Wyoming state water law for the beneficial use of that water as it was originally granted exists. Doesn't change anything just because you entered into it. And it's just, again, trying to provide that absolute reassurance to those folks that are entering into these exchanges. So typically, as it's been alluded to, it'll be an agricultural producer. This just says, regardless of the duration of that exchange, when that exchange is done, you have the full right to use your water rights again.
All right, it's been moved. Do I have a second? Moved by Hicks, seconded by Kolb. Is there discussion on the amendment since we've heard the explanation? Discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, I guess I'm not quite understanding, if it does revert back, is there a formal process that has to go through on that exchange? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Hicks, we can bring up the state engineer if you, oh, Senator Larson has a.
Madam Chairman, I was going to ask that. Could we bring the state engineer in his office up?
Would you
to
please come
kinda
back up to
look it
address
over?
that question?
Madam Chair, Brandon Gebhardt, State Engineer, and with me is Chris Brown from the Wyoming Attorney General's Office. A short answer to that question is, I believe the language proposed would occur anyhow. It just goes back to the original rights, but I think this provides a little clarity to the petitioners to ensure that that the right goes back to its original intent.
Madam Chair, Senator Ide, again, Chris Brown, I supervise the water section of the Attorney General's office. I think the specific question is, how do these end? And the statute, as it's currently written, contemplates two ways. One, the original order that grants the exchange has a termination date in it. So if the applicant has asked for some exchange that has a date certain, it can be put in the exchange itself. Otherwise, it cannot be terminated unless there's a new order issued by the state engineer.
Thank you.
All right, are you good? All right. Any further questions? Okay, maybe hang around just in case. All right, are you ready to vote on the amendment, or do you have any other questions? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion has passed. We are back on, would you like to make any further amendments on the bill? Further amendments?
Madam Chairman, I've just got a question. It's been referenced that there was a proposed amendment from the state engineer's office. I don't have anything in my package that says it was explicitly an amendment. There is a proposed amendment that we have from the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. Oh, here we go.
All right, thank you, guys.
I was wondering where that critter was at. And it's my understanding that the stock growers had a chance to review this. I would ask this question of stock growers, and that they are supportive of the amendment versus the language that was provided by the state engineers. Jim, could you come on up?
So, Senator Hicks, would you mind reading the amendment so the public can hear what the amendment is, and then we can just make sure that we're fully transparent on that?
So on page 2, line 22, after insert, the state engineer shall cause to be published at the petitioner's expense in a newspaper of general circulation in each county where water rights subject to the exchange petition are located, once a week for at least 2 consecutive weeks, a notice of the filing of the exchange petition which identifies the place where the exchange petition is available for public inspection. The last date of publication shall occur not less than 30 days prior to the state engineer entering an order granting the exchange.
All right. Mr. McGagna.
Madam Chairman, Senator Hicks, we think that the amendment proposed by state engineer can operate a little more smoothly than one we had proposed. The one we proposed required the applicant to do the advertising 30 days before the state engineer issues the decision. The potential problem there is, does the applicant know when the state engineer is going to issue that decision so that they can proceed with the advertising? Under the amendment as proposed by state engineer, the state engineer assumes that responsibility. The petitioner still pays for it, so it's not a cost to the state. So we think that is a little better process than the one we had originally proposed.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you both. All right. Does anyone have the pleasure of moving this amendment? Go ahead.
Madam Chairman,
Mayor Larson.
I would move the amendment from the state engineer as written.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Larson, Senator Hicks seconded. Kim, do you have that amendment? And it occurs on page 2, line 22.
Yes, Madam Chair, I have it.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Are there any further amendments on the bill? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify, so is the stock growers amendment, is that withdrawn essentially?
Senator Ide, we never moved that amendment, and the state engineer's amendment took care of their concern, And so that should deal with that, and we won't, no, we do not need that amendment. You're welcome. All right. With that, Kim, could you please call the roll on the bill?
Senate File 66, do pass amended. Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks. Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Larson.
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right. The next Senate file up for our consideration is Senate File 75, our favorite bill, the Omnibus Water Bill Construction. And welcome Director Mead to take us through this very important bill for the state of Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Mead, Director of the Water Development Office. I would just start real quick by reminding everybody that, again, accounts 1, 2, and 3 for water development are funded through a limited distribution of the mineral severance tax. And that really what the construction bill does is it's authorizing projects as water development construction projects, providing appropriations to those particular projects, which then allows the Water Development Commission to enter into agreements with our sponsors, grant loan agreements to actually complete the work. I'd also remind you too that, the construction projects are kind of the culmination of a pretty lengthy process. We go through planning studies that are a year or two in length to understand the needs of our sponsors and come to good alternatives that we can then bring forward as construction projects to be a good use of state funds to solve their needs. So not only have we gone through studies for each one of these projects, but then brought the applications and recommendations back to the Water Development Commission and the Select Water Committee at our November and January meetings for their consideration, had the sponsors in person for questions to be asked and answers to be given. So these are very well vetted projects at this point. The next thing I would do would be to point you towards your blue book that should be in front of you. And I'll just explain the layout of this real quick. So inside the front cover, you will see a blue sheet, which is a summary of the bill. This is the same sheet that's on the front of the actual binder itself. The bill itself is right after the blue sheet. Under tab A is just a short description of our program. Tab B is each one of our water development accounts 1, 2, and 3, and the current balances available for appropriation. And then once you get into tab C and beyond that, that's the recommendations that were considered by the commission and the Select Water Committee for each one of the projects that's in the bill. So I'll take you back to the blue sheet, and we'll be working from that because I know you guys are limited on time. So just to orient you on the blue sheet, if everybody has that in front of them, that first column says tab. So if you want to look at a particular project and find information out about that particular project, that's the tab that recommendation for that project is under. And then the bill page is the bill page where that project lies. The third column is the section of the bill. So the blue sheet here is laid out in the same order as the bill is. So the bill is 54 pages long. There are 8 sections. So as you look down through that column 3, you'll see the headings on each one of the sections. Section 1, the third one down, section 2, and so on and so forth. Then we have the location of the project in column 4. Columns 5, 6, 7, and 8 are the sources of the funding that are being appropriated to the particular project, whether that be account 1, 2, 3. And I'll point out we've got some general funds associated with this bill as well. And then the second to last column are the terms of the particular project. And then the last column gives you a short description of the actual project that we're discussing. So moving into that, I would point you then towards section 1. So you'll see that heading under the third column there. Level 3 projects, new development. So this is account 1, section 1. We've got 2 projects and 2 programs, Bighorn Regional, both of our cloud seeding programs, and then the Skyline Improvement Service District Well Connection 2024. I would point out here with the Bighorn Regional Joint Powers Board, when we received applications this year for planning and construction studies, we had about $45 million worth of requests to the program and only about $18 million to spend on projects this year. So we had to do a lot of prioritizing. One of the things we did was where we felt like we could phase a project and just provide funding for pre-construction, which would be design, permits, bidding documents, easements, things like that. We did that. So on Bighorn, you'll see under WDA 1 column, it says $143,300. So that was our original recommendation, was just to provide pre-construction dollars, knowing that this is a good project and most likely next year that project would be coming back in for additional funds for construction and engineering construction or construction oversight by an engineer. So the Select Water Committee chose to try to fund that at a general fund. So you'll see in that general fund column an amount of $1,659,700 for that Bighorn Regional. So a portion of it would be funded through account 1. The construction portion of it would be contingent upon general funding being transferred to account 1. And that shows up again lower on the blue sheet, and I'll point that out here in a minute. And then on that same Bighorn Regional project, all the way over on the right side on the description, it says C Note 1. And down at the bottom, we have 3 different notes in bold. And that is, again, just contingent upon the transfer of funds from general fund to water development account 1. So the total for the new development section 1 comes to $1,714,951 out of account 1 and the $1,659,700 out of general fund. The second group of projects there are the level 3 projects rehabilitation. So this is under account 2. We have 12 different projects under account 2. And here, what I'd like to point out is a number of these projects. So we have limited funding in account 2. It gets about 2% of the distribution of this mineral severance tax. So over the years, oftentimes, because of the demand on account 2, these are projects that are 15 years and older. A lot of times it's agricultural projects. We've had to transfer funding from account 1 to account 2 to cover those costs. And so overall on the description column, you'll see a lot of C Note 2s. And again, that's just the actual appropriation is contingent upon transferring. In this case, if you add all those up, it's a little under 7 million. So we're transferring $7 million from account 1 to account 2 to cover those projects. And then the other 2 somewhat unique things, or a couple more than 2, if you go down to, if you're looking at the tab, it's down on tab K in that first column, Goshen Irrigation District's Tunnel 1 and 2 rehabilitation. This is somewhat unique, this project, as well as down on tab MC, which is the Laprelle Dam rehabilitation. These projects received some funding through LISRA back in 2022 through a supplemental water bill. And the language in that bill required the project to be set up as, or authorized as, a water development construction project. And so that's what we're doing with this bill, is bringing those into the construction bill to authorize them. And then that would give the ability for the commission to expend that money on that project when it's needed as a construction project. So those are a little unique. And then later on here, I'll show you where it's actually in the bill, where that previous legislation is amended. And then the other one I'd like to point out is down on tab P. This is the Ranchester Transmission Line 2024. This is very similar to the Bighorn project we mentioned. Our original recommendation was just for funding of the pre-construction dollars. Again, knowing we were going to have that additional demand here in the near future, the Select Water Committee chose to fund the construction dollars out of general fund in the amount of $2,196,400. So the total for account 2 projects is $10,799,600, and then that general fund funding that I just mentioned. Then moving down on the blue sheet, we get into section 3, which is amendments to previous projects. And these are amendments to both account 1 and account 2 projects. We've got a total of 16 items there. 11 of them are time extensions. And most of the time, our time extensions are related to either easement issues and taking longer than expected to get the easements in place that are needed, or where a project sponsor has gone after federal funding and it's taking a little time to work through the federal process, which is just hanging things up a little bit. So we need some additional time before that money reverts. And then we see on tab S under that third group of projects, the Small Water Projects Program New Development. This is where every year, considering the applications we receive, we add additional funds to that program to be able to fund the projects from a particular year. Then you move down to the F2 tab, Sponsors Contingency Funds, Account 3. We are requesting, so the Levitt Reservoir expansion project, there was a good amount of our sponsor contingency funds that went towards that project over the last couple of years. The sponsor contingency fund, both for accounts 1, 2, and 3, this one's 3, are really to be able to react quickly and not have to go through another legislative session if something comes up in a project, whether that be bids come in high, we have some unforeseen conditions in a project. Once we get into construction, we have a large change order and it makes sense to keep the project moving to go ahead and move forward. This gives the commission and the Select Water Committee flexibility to be able to do that throughout the year. So we want to replenish that account on the order of an additional $20 million from account 3 into that sponsors contingency fund for account 3. And then up on tab V as in victory, we have Levitt Reservoir expansion. The Shell Valley Watershed Improvement District have been working on for a number of years to get the Levitt Reservoir expansion under construction. We received bids this year. They came in high again, but the bid packages were split up into 4 different packages. With the blessing of the commission and feedback from the Select Water Committee, they went ahead and awarded 3 of those bid packages. So there's 1 more that they need to go out to bid for, which is a transfer pipeline, which allows getting some of that additional storage water to the beneficiaries of that project in the amount of $10,850,000 that we'd like to add to that particular project. And then the last 2 projects under that section 2, Happy Valley Water Transmission and Storage and the Sheridan Northeast Transmission Main Extension. These were projects from last year where we provided pre-construction dollars. We did not recommend construction dollars this year because they were still going through design and getting their easements in place. But again, knowing that was going to be a demand on the program here in the very near future, most likely next year, the Select Water Committee chose to try to fund the construction portion of that through general funds. So you see those 2 numbers under the general fund column. So in all, with the amendments, we have $1 million from account 1, $30,850,000 from account 3, and then the $4,592,450 from general fund. And we get into those smaller sections below. So section 3, this has to do with the Small Water Projects Program, new development and rehab. And what's happening there is in previous legislation, those 2 programs are set to sunset or not take on any new projects as of July 1st, 2025. And this is a very popular program that does a lot of good work within different watersheds throughout Wyoming. So the commission and the Select Water Committee chose to remove that sunset date in both accounts 1 and account 2 small water project programs. The next one down, section 4, this just effectuates the transfer of funds from account 1 to account 2 in the amount of $7 million, as I mentioned, to cover all of our account 2 projects. And then you move down to section 5. This is an actual transfer of funds from the general fund to account 1 to cover the, again, Bighorn Regional project, and then the 2 projects I just mentioned, Happy Valley and Sheridan Northeast. So those equate to $6,252,150 being transferred from general fund to account 1. And then you move down to that next one, section 6. This is the transfer of funds from general fund to account 2. So this would cover the Ranchester transmission project under account 2 that I mentioned. And then that last section 7, relates back to Goshen Irrigation District, LaPrelle, and Fontenelle from that 2022 supplemental water bill. And just going in there and removing the requirement to go back to SLIB to authorize that as a water development construction project. Now we're doing that through this bill, so SLIB's no longer needed. And then once an agreement is put together with the Bureau of Reclamation on the Fontenelle Reservoir to acquire additional storage, we would work through the governor's office and a commission to be able to sign that contract and move forward with that purchase. And then the last section, Section 8 of the bill, is just an effective date. So with that, I would ask if there are any questions.
Senator French has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Either last year or whenever, my mind's foggy, there was a proposal to end the cloud seeding. I believe we discussed it on the floor. And I don't know if we passed that or just what. And then there was also a bill to see what the effects of the cloud seeding was. So, if it was doing us any good for our $1 million plus that we're spending, what kind of benefit we were getting. And I'm sorry, I'm short on details, but you get the gist of it. If you could comment on that, please, thank you.
Sure, Madam Chair, Senator French. So yes, there was an assessment study done. It's kind of came to a conclusion here this fall. We provided an update to the Commission and the Select Water Committee at our November meeting, I believe it was, on that. What it showed was that there was a nominal increase in stream flow. So what it was doing was looking at one particular year in the Medbo Sierra Madre aerial program. So that's the one that would benefit the North Platte system, Laramie River North Platte system. And what it showed, if I can find my notes here, was in a given year, or that particular year, there would be an additional, what they estimated to be an additional 4,500 to 10,000 acre feet of water that would show up as stream flow in the system as a result of cloud seeding that particular year. The mean of that was around 7,000 acre feet of additional water. And then backing that into the cost of the program and a price per acre foot, the mean, or you could say average, it's very similar, would be about $81 or $82 per acre foot based on the cost of the program and the average water that showed up in the stream as a result of that program. And then I would say that we have that program in the North Platte, Medbo Sierra Madre, and then we also have the ground-based program in the Wind River and also hits part of the Sierra Madres as well. And that particular program is fairly heavily subsidized by lower basin state entities to a tune of about 63%. So Wyoming's only putting in about $300,000 and we have lower basin states putting in an additional $500,000 to keep that program running.
All right. And Director, do you think you could get us, I think we had a paper copy of that, just email that to us and we'll get it out to not only this committee, but when it comes to the floor, we might want to have that on hand. Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Director, as I recall that conversation about aerial cloud seeding, the increase was within the margin of error. I mean, if you're going to look at the percentages and, if you're going to look at it when they statistically analyzed what actually was the outcome of that. So I was left fairly unconvinced that, the numbers are accurate. I mean, I do believe it does something and I do. We saw the information, but when it comes to this, so this program, the aerial program, so to be clear that the 300,000 you indicated was Wyoming's share of this program for aerial cloud seeding.
Go ahead, Director.
Madam Chair, Senator Kolb, that is correct for the ground-based in the Colorado River Basin. That's where there's a breakdown of 63% is covered by lower basin state entities, 37% by Wyoming. So in the aerial program, there's a contribution from the city of Cheyenne in the amount of $50,000. The other $825,000 is Wyoming's share.
Go ahead, follow up.
Yes, follow-up. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
I would, if I could just add one more thing, I agree with Senator Culp's conclusions on the study. I have asked this question, or it's come up in my mind, the season running into that 2019-2020 analysis, or that aerial program season that was analyzed, was a dry year. So in my mind, we have to consider there's a lot of different variables and things that change from year to year. In particular, that year, I'm guessing we went into that season with very low soil moisture. So perhaps we didn't see the analysis come up with the actual additional acre feet of stream flow, because a good majority of that, I imagine, went to fill up the soil before we could see stream flow. So would we have a higher stream flow benefit in years where you came out of a wet fall, wet previous year? I would assume yes, but I don't know that for sure. So that's one thing to consider as well. There's a lot of variables that go into this from year to year.
All right. Further questions for the director? Senator Larson?
Madam Chairman, thank you. Do you have a number for what a dam would cost per acre foot? I mean, comparable to the $81 that you had mentioned? I mean, I think this is a pretty good bang for the buck.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I don't have a number. Every dam's different, unique situations. But again, when we're looking at dams, there are thousands and thousands of dollars per acre foot, but that's a one-time capital construction cost that gets spread out over, a 100-year life of a dam and reservoir, whereas this is an annual cost for cloud seeding. So we did I did a little bit of analysis considering dams and some of the economic numbers that we had, say, on Alkali Creek Reservoir. And that particular project, we reran the numbers from last year, 2022. Alfalfa prices per ton were over $200 a ton. And I think the additional benefit for an acre foot of water in the stream, this case being an acre foot from storage, was about $90 an acre foot, I think. So fairly similar to what you'd see from the cloud seeding cost at the
Senator
$81,
Cole.
$82.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Director, would you agree or disagree that cloud seeding and storage and a dam are the same things? I always assumed they were two different things that work together. I don't know do you think it's a fair analysis to compare a dam storage capacity to a cloud seeding program? I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Kolb, there are two different things. Cloud seeding, you have to have seedable events, so you have to have moisture to be able to make snow. But in addition to that, that's just going to provide more snowpack. It's going to melt out. If you don't have storage to hold it, then you're going to catch it as natural stream flow when it comes down. Maybe that runoff would last a little bit longer with additional snow. I'm simply comparing, if you put an additional acre foot of water into the stream, what is kind of the value of that compared to the cost of the cloud seeding? So, to put an additional acre foot of water into the stream from a storage project, and it doesn't really matter where the water comes from, but it's an acre foot. What can they then produce for additional tonnage on their field of alfalfa minus their additional production costs? And that provides you a value for that acre foot of water for that particular agricultural situation. And then comparing that to the annual cost of cloud seeding at $81, $82 from this assessment study, they're fairly similar.
And that would be assuming it was stored or used in some fashion, not just running down the river, but yeah.
Correct. And
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if it was used by industry or
Mhm.
municipal use, then, it's going to have a higher value
Right,
than
right.
ag. So
Okay, well, I think we'll get us back on track to the bill now. I'm sure we'll have a lively discussion on cloud seeding when we get to the floor. With that, do you have further comments, or are we ready to take public comment? Thank you for your presentation. Any further questions? All right, I think for now, we'll put you on hold and we'll take public comment on this bill. Is there any public comment? Public comments? on the omnibus water bill construction. Is there anyone online?
No, Madam Chairman.
There's no one online. So with that, we will close public comments. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Cole, seconded by French. Are there any amendments to the bill? Senator Cole.
No, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd move that we amend tab D on page 5 and strike cloud seeding Medicine Bow, Sierra Madre, Mountain Ranges, 2025 aerial.
Okay, take us back to where you're at on the page of the bill so that Kim can track in what we're proposing. Page 5 of the bill,
Tab D,
Senator.
page 5.
Okay. And then what line?
We'll strike the program. Let's see a line, Madam Chair.
Okay, so you're on line 21.
Oh, I'm reading.
Is that correct on page 5?
Oh, I gotta get the right bill.
And then you would go through
Let's see here. Page 5.
line 21 on page 6. Are you doing the Wind River on page 7 too?
No, ma'am. No, Madam Chairman. The ground, that I didn't propose to remove the ground-based cloud seeding, just the aerial
So
cloud
just the
seeding.
Medicine Bow, Sierra Madre,
Yes.
the aerial. Okay, so that would be page 5, line 21 through 23. And on to page 6, line 1 through 21, is that correct? It may go farther.
Yeah.
On to page 7,
Yes.
lines 1 through 12. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, Madam Chairman.
All right. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion? Senator Hicks?
Question. This would be to the director. So do we know if there's a difference in the efficacy of aerial seeding versus cloud-based? Is one more effective than the other?
Madam Chair, Senators Hicks, I'd ask that Barry Lawrence, our Deputy Director of Planning, come up and talk about that.
Welcome, Barry.
Good morning, Madam
Good
Chair.
morning.
Members of the commission, and Senator Hicks. Good question that you ask. Most of the western states, prevailing western states that are doing cloud seeding would do ground-based. There are some states that do airborne. I will tell you the premium program would be to have a hybrid, both ground-based and airborne. Obviously, sometimes there's situations where the ground-based, the plume doesn't get up into and interacts with the liquid water in the clouds, and because of prevailing winds and so forth, versus aircraft where you can position yourself right in the cloud, in the liquid water, and affect a change. And so it's very effective, but obviously aircraft as pricier. It's one of the reasons some of the states have gone to ground-based only and have not gotten in the airborne arena. But I will tell you, some of the states, such as Idaho and so forth, they have hybrid systems where they have both ground-based and airborne because they figure that's most bang for the buck.
All right. Any further questions? Other questions?
Madam Chairman, so if we were to adopt this, what agreements are in place that would have to be relinquished with the water development program?
Madam Chair, Senator Hicks, on the aerial program, the only agreement that we have in place is with the Jackson Water Conservancy District down in Colorado in the Never Summer Range. We have a kind of a secondary priority where if there are no seedable events in Wyoming, we would go down and seed events if there were events available in Colorado. So we would, I think we've got that in place already.
Madam Chairman, I would also add, Jason is correct for this winter season. However, it's the end of the 3-year trial with those folks down there in the Colorado Water Conservation Board paying for that. And they've indicated probably for next winter, they may not have the funding to continue the airborne. They've gone to some ground-based. down there as well. So they're running a hybrid down there.
All right, okay.
Quick question.
Well, before we do that, I just want to say one thing. I would like us to give our staff latitude to take out, because we're kind of doing this on the fly, so if this amendment were to pass, some latitude to utilize whatever in the bill that they need to remove that. So just so everybody's aware of that on the amendment. Go ahead, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Be real quick here. Looked at this, tried to study it last year, my first year, trying to understand whether there's good data out there on results of cloud seeding. Can you guys recommend an unbiased publication that has done a lot of research on cloud seeding? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Senator Ide. I think we'll add that to their list of things that they'll be sending us. We do have a report that we received at Select Water that Director Mead will email us, and we'll get that to you. Right now, let's get back to the amendment because we do have one other bill up, and we have 2 extra committee meetings this week, so we're kind of full. So let's, is there any further discussion on the amendment? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? That amendment has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Are there any further amendments? Further amendments on the bill? Did you have one, Senator Hicks?
Madam Chairman, you have a proposed amendment in front of you. This goes into, everybody have that?
Kim, do you have that? All right.
Madam Chairman, this specifically deals with the Small Water Project Program. It adds $500,000 of general fund to the program. But just tell you, I think this is probably one of the best programs that's operated. It hits a non-traditional audience. Most of these are going to small irrigation, individual ranches, BLM grazing allotments to provide stock water and water for wildlife, some stream restoration, buried ditches and canals for efficiency. This program is eligible to anybody in the state of Wyoming that meets the public benefit test of the program. In other words, if it's a public benefit, which is substantially different than all the other programs that we run through water development that have to be public entities.
Mm-hmm.
And so consequently, it expands the opportunity for ditch companies, canal companies, individual ranchers or irrigators to participate, so long as we can define and show that there's a public benefit. There's small grants up to $35,000. The state only pays 50% of up to $35,000. So if it's a $20,000 project, it's a $10,000 grant. So, Madam Chairman, this would just, when we marked this up at Select Water at the time, we didn't think there was a sufficient amount of money in account one to pay for that. It looks like by some of the work that the JAC has done and a recommendation that there is going to be additional funds available in account one. And so with that, Madam Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
All right, Senator Hicks, I'd like you to clarify the amount that you are requesting with this amendment. It's not clear. I know there's a lot of renumbering going on, but just for the public and for the committee's benefit, could you please restate how much this
would be an additional $500,000 that would go into the new project, construction of small dams, windmills, springs, development. I've included some additional language in there that just says, and this is clarification, guzzlers and other water collection, storage, and drinking systems, pipelines to impound, develop, and convey water for livestock and wildlife, irrigation, environmental, and recreational purposes. If you go into page 35, line 7, the way that we do this is in the section of the non-codified water law. That's where you bring in 99.3.2103. So it keeps a running tab on all of these programs. So you'll see on line 35, section 17, all the way down to page 36. or page 36, line 3. It just shows the total that's been appropriated since this program started. It changes that amount by 500,000.
All
So,
right.
yeah, same thing, it goes down into the next section. That shows that it goes into the small water project program account. And then we get into the bottom of the amendment and onto the next page, that would be general funds.
I
And
guess
then
it does say 500,000 there.
it's
on the
a
bottom of
consistent
page 1.
$500,000 increase all the way through. And it's just the
All
way
right.
we do the water bill. So there's not 500 plus 500 plus, it's just the same 500,000 that we track all the way through. And then we get into the back page on line 2, 51 through, on page 51, that's just the transfer from general fund to account 1. Stand for any questions.
All right, any questions on the amendment? Did I get a second on that? It was moved by Hicks, seconded by Kolb. Any questions on the amendment? Senator Larson?
Madam Chairman, I think the director maybe had a comment, if that would be okay,
Oh,
and.
yes, I didn't notice that. Director Mead, go ahead.
Madam Chair, just a quick technical correction on page 1 of the amendment where we see where it says, it's on line 14, page 35, line 17 and 18. So this is where we call out the entire total project costs, and since we provide 50%, the actual project cost would be twice that amount. So
Okay.
that should be, instead of 19,826,000, it should be 20,326,000. So if you add 500,000, the projects that you're gonna would be 1 million. So that should be 20,326,000.
Kim, did you get that? All right. Okay, thank you, Director. We appreciate the help there. All right, any other further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of this amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That amendment has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Are there any further amendments on the omnibus water construction bill? Further amendments? Seeing none. Kim, would you please call the roll?
Senate File 75, do pass amended. Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Larson. Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, that bill has passed the committee. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 103. Yes, and we will excuse Senator Hicks to go to the Education Committee. We'll need to have Senator Salazar. I saw him out in the hallway. So
There he is.
Senator Hicks, would you like to fill out your absentee vote on this bill, or would you like us to keep it open for you? All right, thank you. Welcome, Senator Salazar.
Madam Chair.
Please take us through Senate File 103.
Yes, Madam Chair, with your indulgence, may I ask someone to come up?
Let us give you some instruction on the microphones. The middle one is not working correctly. So if you could take one of the outside microphones, that would be very helpful to us. And did you want to bring up former Representative Lindholm with you today?
Ma'am, if I could.
Yes, go right ahead. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Senate Ag Committee. I bring before you Senate File 103, which is the Wyoming Prime Act. I will briefly go over the bill. As you recall, last year, you good folks were supportive of the Food Freedom Act amendments allowing dairy products to be fully allowed to be sold at the market. This is the final step in the Food Freedom Act, which is allowing local farmers and ranchers to sell their beef with a great number of restrictions without USDA approval. Now, they still need to go to a Wyoming slaughterhouse, which is inspected by the state. But this is something that really completes the freedom of our farmers and ranchers. And I will go through the bill. If you take a look, I want to specifically go through the bill. If you look at page 3, line 5, starting with line 5, except as prohibited by federal law and subject to the subdivision of this section, a producer may sell meat products from cattle, sheep, swine, or goats raised by the producer that were slaughtered on the premises of the producer or at a custom slaughter facility if the following conditions are met. One of them is that the meat products are produced from animals that are raised, slaughtered, and processed in Wyoming. The meat products are sold directly to the informed end consumer in Wyoming. That a prominent written warning statement shall be delivered to the informed end consumer at the time of sale. That the meat cannot be sold outside of the state of Wyoming or resold outside the state of Wyoming. And if you look at page 4, line 7, an informed end consumer who obtains meat products pursuant to this act agrees not to sell, donate, or commercially redistribute the meat. So one of the reasons, and the other thing I will mention, Madam Chair, is the United States Congress at this time is currently deciding whether the Federal Prime Act will become federal law. This bill only goes into effect if Congress passes the federal. So if the federal is passed, then this comes into effect. And I will mention that one of the co-sponsors of the federal is our own Congresswoman Hageman. So, and I think what makes this such an incredible opportunity is that, number one, people are looking for local food products. You know, food is going up in cost. And I think this is one of the avenues that we might be able to actually control the costs with local food. People want to purchase local food. They want those dollars to stay in their local community, to contribute to the community as a whole. And so this is really a win-win, in my opinion. But again, I preface this bill with the fact that it will only take effect if the United States Congress passes the federal act. Now, someone might ask the question, why now? Why do we need to do that? Well, for two reasons. First, by passing this legislation, as other states are considering, we're telling Congress to get their act together and to pass the Federal Prime Act. Secondly, if we pass this now, when and or if Congress passes the Prime Act, we're not waiting 9 months for the next session to allow our ranchers and farmers to sell their meat products at a farm market. So it makes sense. And then finally, I will say this: if you look at the names on this bill, it's a very odd assortment of names, which you probably won't see very often. But there is widespread support, I believe, in the legislature for this bill. With that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for questions, although I would like to ask actually the father of the Food Freedom Act in Wyoming to, with your permission, to say a couple words, if he may. So.
Sure, and I just have one question
Yes.
before you do. My question was on the bottom of page 4. The governor, on the advice of the Attorney General, certifies. So what does that process look like, and how does that actually happen? Because I see this as a trigger bill, much like what we passed on when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. It's basically a trigger bill. It would be a court decision or a passage of legislation, correct? So,
Correct. And
so then the governor certifies. What does that look like?
yeah, good question, Madam Chair. Yes. And so obviously we need a responsible authority to verify that in fact Congress has passed the bill and that is the mechanism through the states, the Attorney General obviously working with the executive branch for the governor to certify it. Once that's certified by the proper authority, which in this case would be the Attorney General, the governor, then this trigger bill kicks into effect as law. So do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah, and really appreciate the opportunity, Madam Chair and committee members. When looking at this legislation, it's important to also note that the federal legislation purposely designates that states don't have to do this if they don't want to. And it specifically says that it is the state sovereignty, it is the state legislatures that decide if they want to go down this route of allowing custom slaughter facilities to retail. So that certification process would happen once it's an officially enrolled act and signed by the president. At that point, we'd lean towards the attorney general's and the governor's office in determining that has gone through. Or, Madam Chair and members of the committee, maybe the governor just decides to say, "To hell with it, let's just do it."
All right, let's not cuss in the committee meeting, but questions? All right, Senator Ide first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, you brought up right there at the end what I was thinking all along. Why do we need the trigger to just go ahead and have food freedom in Wyoming without waiting on Congress to pass anything? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, whoever would like to.
Madam Chairman, I'll do it without cussing. I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. When looking at the Federal Meat Inspection Act, which governs meat inspection throughout the United States, I could make it a really long, starting in 1906 and explaining how it was amended over time by Packer lobbyists. But I'm not gonna bore you, Senator Ide. The important thing to note is the Wholesome Meat Act, which was passed in 1967, which designated 3 levels of inspection. And it's the federal government that says you can absolutely not do this, and the USDA would come and shut down our primacy and shut down our state inspected facilities. That's why this legislation is so important, because it skates right along that line, right up to the toe, which Wyoming's always been very proud of being able to do in regards to food freedom, and ensures that we don't violate our primacy. The way I read the legislation, however, I will not speak for the Wyoming Department of Agriculture.
All right, Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Father Lindholm. I think the odds, what's your opinion about the odds of the Wyoming State Legislative Body and the governor signing such a bill into law as opposed to the federal government doing anything? What is your thoughts?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And to Senator Kolb's question, I think you're absolutely right. Wyoming's always led on this. 100% chance that Wyoming stands with our farmers and ranchers. Probably a 1% chance that Congress does act. It's also important to note too, though, that there is a Senate version of this legislation being, the primary sponsor is Senator Angus King out of Maine, who's an independent that caucuses with the Democrats. So there's even some Democrats that identify the need for change. And Senator Lummis is co-sponsoring on the Senate side also. Possibilities exist.
1%, so you're saying there's a chance.
We have a chance, yes, ma'am.
All right, further questions, Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Does the federal thing just mention cattle, sheep, swine, or goats? I see the bill does, and you're basing it on what the feds may do. My question is, what about chickens, turkeys, rabbits? Our family back in the day raised all kinds of chickens and turkeys and rabbits that we processed. And I know we ate a lot of them, but there was no way we ate them all. So my parents must have traded them or sold them or something. Why is it just these 4 things that are mentioned? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. To Senator French's question, it comes down to who has control over what animal. I know that sounds crazy, and the federal government largely is. The Federal Meat Inspection Act and the USDA only govern certain animals, large animals in particular, and other pieces of legislation govern other animals. For instance, catfish cannot be, catfish has to be USDA inspected. All other type of farm fish, you can butcher yourself right here on this table and sell directly to consumers, but you can't do it with catfish. Buffalo, you could butcher yourself and sell directly to consumers. FDA is probably going to come in and have something to say about it, but that would be that regulatory agency. The biggest issue is the Federal Meat Inspection Act, and that's what governs those 4 animals, and that's why you see them listed in this legislation. Largely, the FDA has been easier to work with, and has leaned towards states' rights as far as how those animals are processed and sold. And that's why chickens currently in the state of Wyoming, you can do up to 1,000 per person and sell directly to consumers without any labeling, licensing, or inspection process. You can do rabbits, you can do a lot of farm fish, largely freedom. But when it comes down to the USDA, pretty absent.
All right. Any further questions for the sponsors of the bill? Thank you both for your work on this. We've been doing this for a long time together, so thank you. We'll open up to public comment now, unless there's someone from the agency. Department of Ag first, and then we'll go to public comment. You can come down if you'd like to, and just don't use the middle microphone, please.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Justin Latham with the Wyoming Department of Agriculture, Consumer Health Services. I just wanted to speak on this a little bit. Our read is that the state act is more permissive than the Fed Act, which could be problematic. The potential problem is with the procedure of slaughtering and selling by the producer is against the personal use exemption. That exemption identifies that it's for that producer's household, non-paying guests and employees. If you're slaughtering and processing animals for others, that makes this a custom process, or you would be a custom processor. So that is an area that we see some potential problems.
All right. Do you have any? I have a question for you. Is that contained in federal or state law? So if that comes back to the state jurisdiction over that and primacy is no longer a huge issue, would that be a concern? Or would we be able to just be able to craft that law on our own as contemplated by this legislation?
Madam Chairwoman, that is actually in 9 CFR 303.1, so that is in federal law. So
Is in federal law, and the Prime Act won't do anything with that federal law as it stands now?
correct, as it's proposed now, it would not do anything with that portion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Any further
Chairman.
questions?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do you have a specific area in the bill that you're questioning and an idea of an amendment or anything?
Sure, that would be page 3,
Okay.
where line item 6, where a producer may sell meat products from cattle, sheep, swine that the producer were slaughtered on the premise of the producer at the custom slaughter facility. So it's essentially on the premise of the producer. As it's proposed now, the current Prime Act would allow custom slaughter facility to sell those products. Then again, on page 5, that same language is entered on line item 2 and carries on through 3.
So you're saying slaughtered on the premise is the problem?
By the producer, slaughtered on premise and allowed to sell. So currently, what's allowable is for the animal to be sold live on the hoof and to be processed at a custom facility. But a producer of that animal can slaughter his own animal for his own personal use. And that's use in his household for his non-paying guests, employees, et cetera. So that's the issue.
Senator Cole?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Question. Wouldn't this be a moot point if the federal government changed the regulations? It's a food trigger bill, I guess, the way I look at it. All the things you just quoted would probably be irrelevant at that point, right? And currently, the way the law is, this can't be done. So it becomes a moot point. So I guess I wouldn't foresee the federal government allowing us, if they were to give us the Food Freedom Act, and then hold over something that would make this not be able to happen. That's my question. I mean, I realize, you're working with the federal government, I don't want to lose primacy either. But the point I think is I don't know what relevance that has if the federal government changes the law. At the federal government level, it becomes, I don't understand why it's relevant. Could you help me with that? Thank you.
Madam
ahead.
Chairman,
Yep.
Senator Cole, the reason why is the current Prime Act, as it's proposed on the federal level, would only allow custom processed or state processed products to cross state lines. Because this would not be an inspected and it's still accountable to 416, which is the sanitation guidelines, that part was not removed when they are proposing the Federal Prime Act, essentially. So that part would still be in there.
All right, well, I have a follow-up question on that because it, in my mind, and help me if I'm missing something, it's not saying that the producer is slaughtering it on his premises. And for example, I'll give you an example. My son-in-law and daughter have a USDA inspected facility. They have a mobile slaughter unit that can come to your property and slaughter your animal. So I don't see here where it says it is the producer doing the slaughter here. And when I read that, that is what I was thinking. We know there's a mobile slaughter unit at Western Community College that they use for the training of the students. I was contemplating that these are the mobile slaughter units that someday I hope Wyoming has a fleet of, quite frankly. And so to me, that's what this means. Is there something in there that you're reading it differently or that we need to just adjust for that?
Maybe it's my misinterpretation, Madam Chairman. My understanding of line 8 on page 3 was producer that were slaughtered on premise of the producer at the custom facility if the following conditions were met. So maybe that's my misinterpretation.
Okay, well, we'll let the co-sponsors or the sponsors of this take both of our comments into consideration, and maybe they would have a committee of the whole amendment if there would you please work with them and try to get that worked out between all of you?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. Any further questions for the department? Seeing none, all right. We will go to public testimony then, and we don't have a lot of time left. We're gonna gavel in at 10. We have some time, but if we could make our comments brief and to the point, I would certainly appreciate it. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I really appreciate it. Shannon Anderson on behalf of Powder River Basin Resource Council. On behalf of our ag producing members and our meat consuming members, we support this bill. We have for years supported additional opportunities for local food to add value to Wyoming's economy and healthy food for people to consume in our state. So we support the bill. It threads that fine line very well, in our opinion, and keeps us in primacy and allows us to move forward if the federal government chooses to do so as well.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Anderson. Anyone? Questions? Seeing none,
Thank
you've
you.
got off easy. There we go. Farm Bureau, come on up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau, sitting in support of this bill. I really appreciate that this bill has to take the federal actions before it becomes effective. And the previous speaker didn't seem to be as optimistic as I am. I think it's a much greater than a 1% chance of the federal law passing. This is an issue that's hitting nationwide, 2%, 1%. I'm much more optimistic. This is a nationwide issue that consumers are clamoring to know where their food comes from. And I will point out that this bill does limit it to intra-state sales. We cannot sell it outside. As soon as you start crossing state lines, then some of the other rules come into effect that it does have to be inspected. With that, sitting in support of this bill, appreciate what it does and what it doesn't do. I would sit for any questions you or the committee may have for me.
Questions for the Farm Bureau? Questions? Seeing none,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Jim McGagnon, Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. While we're normally reluctant to put things in the statutes that are just a prayer and a hope, in this case, I believe it does make some sense, and it might strengthen our ability to secure the necessary changes at the federal level. Just one thought for your consideration, thinking of an industry that is beginning to grow in the state of Wyoming, and that's the production of yaks. And I'm wondering if on page 3, line 7, and on page 5, line 1, if it might be appropriate to insert yaks. I don't know if what's in the federal law would be applicable there or not. Perhaps Mr. Lindholm could tell you whether that's appropriate or not, but from the state perspective, I think there would be some value in doing that. With that, again, reiterate our support for the bill, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Magagna. Any questions for Mr. Magagna? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, any other public comment in the room? Seeing none, one more. Okay, I thought I might let you address the yak after we take our public comment online, right before we go into working the bill. Would that be all right? Okay, we'll go online. It looks like we have Elena Campbell online with us. Kim, could we let her into the waiting room there?
She should be coming up any moment.
Welcome, Elena.
Chairman and committee members, thank you for having me. My name is Elena Campbell, fourth generation, come from a family of ranchers in Sheridan. Very much support this bill. One of the things that I think is so important about it is our own state resiliency. We do face increasing threats, economic threats. I'd like very much for us to be positioned at an economic level, at truly just a sustenance level, to be able to take care of ourselves. I hate that primacy is even a concern. Constitutionally, this is going to be intrastate. I don't understand how there is so much push from the federal level into our own state affairs. So to the extent we can push back against even that, I would very much appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for taking my testimony.
Thank you for being with us today. Are there any questions for Elena? Questions for Ms. Campbell? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today, and we will let you go at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll bring the Mr. Lindholm and Senator Salazar back up to answer the question about the yaks before we close public testimony.
Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
Without doing further research, yaks are amended into the exotic animal area of inspection, so they wouldn't necessarily fit under the current FMIA, but I would ask for a little bit more time, and I'll double check and verify.
Of course, and obviously Senator Salazar could bring an amendment from the floor if necessary. And any further comments before we close public testimony?
No, ma'am.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right. Public testimony is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Ide, seconded by Kolb. Amendments on the bill. Are there any amendments? Amendments on the bill? Any discussion on the bill? Discussion on the bill? Question being called. Kim, could you please call the roll?
Senate File 103 do pass. Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks.
Excused.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Larson.
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 excused.
All right, that has passed, and we will see that on the floor shortly. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We will be meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Actually, let's make it 7:30, Kim. We'll meet tomorrow at 7:30 to consider 3 bills. Senate File 73, Concealed Firearms Permit Eligibility. Senate File 105, Wyoming Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act, and Senate File 109, Prohibit Red Flag Gun Seizure Act. Again, that will be tomorrow at 7:30 in room 6. Is it in room 6 tomorrow? Our normal room?
Yes, Madam
Yes,
Chairman.
room 6. So just pre-note